Today, the Nintendo 3DS servers go offline for good, never to return. This means that all the paid DLC for Fire Emblem Awakening, Fire Emblem Fates, and Fire Emblem Echoes will vanish. You can still access it using emulators and homebrew consoles, but you will never be able to organically go online and get these the old-fashioned way. This also means that there will be no way to ever again download Fire Emblem Revelation.
Oh no! Anyway.
Yesterday, I completed my final ever stream of Corin quests, a playthrough of Fates where I use Corins exclusively made by my chat. I go online, I connect to their castles, I go and recruit their Corins and add them to my roster. This was the first thing I ever streamed live on my channel, and I've done a total of 7 seasons, probably recruiting and killing hundreds of Corins in the process. With the servers now permanently going offline, I will never be able to do Corin Quest in the same way again, and it's a bittersweet feeling. It feels like the end of an era which was probably my favorite ever when it comes to Fire Emblem. So in today's video, I was thinking we could go back and look at this era and its 3 games and talk about what exactly made them so great. Was it just nostalgia, or was there truly something more to these games? Let's find out. Any Fire Emblem fan who has been around for a while remembers the dark ages of Fire Emblem, where the series was in jeopardy and people wondered if we'd ever again see another Fire Emblem game come out in the Wests. And that's when Fire Emblem Awakening arrived on the horizon and revived the series. With it came a huge influx of new Fire Emblem fans, and a massive clash ensued between the veterans of the series and what we dubbed the Awakening babies. Message boards and forums all over the internet were flooded with new people asking questions. It was a very exciting time, but also a tumultuous one. Many veterans of the series felt like Awakening was too dumbed down and mainstream, and that it wasn't even a real Fire Emblem game. Personally, I was never a big fan of Awakening when it came out, and I was in the camp of people who viewed it as a little bit of a stupid game, and I really just preferred the older ones. But I will say that Awakening has grown on me in the years since. While I'm still not a huge fan of its gameplay, and I feel like it's really more of a sandbox type game than a true Fire Emblem one, where the focus just lies on building up really OP units and sending them into solo huge armies. However, I will say that Fire Emblem Awakening did a lot of cool stuff that inspired many later games. Its presentation is gorgeous. The character designs, the music, and the cinematics hold up today even though the game is over a decade old. Awakening did start a tradition that I've later come to resent a bit. It was the first game that really brought power creep through DLC. I am 100% convinced that one of the reasons why Lunatic and Lunatic Plus felt so incredibly overtuned was that the developers wanted to incentivize people to buy the DLC to gain an increase in power. And this is something we've seen repeat itself a lot since. While I'm not sad to see Awakening's DLC go, as I feel like it was mostly very uninspired and it also retconned a bunch of important deaths, I do feel bad for everyone who bought it and thought they'd have it forever. Hot off the trails of Awakening Mania, Fire Emblem knocked it out of the ballpark again with another banger in Fire Emblem Fates. This was when Fire Emblem really started taking off on YouTube. My channel went from around 10,000 subscribers to around 50,000 in the span of just a few months. Fire Emblem Fates was, and is in my opinion, one of the best games in the franchise. They took so many things that Awakening failed at and learned from them. The pair-up mechanic, for example, which was one of my least favorite ones in Awakening, was given a massive overhaul and became one of my favorite mechanics, with the dual strike and dual guard systems being so incredibly fun to play around with, even to this day. I really hope that a future Fire Emblem game decides to bring it back. Borrowing from the pages of Pokemon, Fire Emblem Fates released in multiple games, and their decision to make Birthright for the casuals and Conquest for the veterans was such a genius move. It seems to me like Fire Emblem has always struggled to bridge the gap between casuals and elitists, and what better way to please both sides than giving each of them their own game? The third game, Revelation, for all my dislike of it, was also a great sandbox game for those who really wanted to train and pair up all the characters in the game. However, it is Conquest who I really think deserves a lot of praise. As someone who has recently developed and released my own Fire Emblem game, I can say that the amount of playtesting that went into each of Conquest's levels exceeds that of the other two games combined several times over. You don't just create maps like these without playing them excessively. While the late game of Conquest gets a little crazy, with its generics often having 4 to 5 skills, I still find each playthrough of this game to be a fun experience, even though I probably cleared it over 20 times. And that is a pretty phenomenal achievement. Fire Emblem Fates was quite ridiculed when it came out though. Its story was bad. Really bad. Probably as bad as Engage's was, if not even worse. I remember tearing this game's story a new one when I played it. I had so much fun just ripping into the writing of this game, to the point where I think a lot of people got very annoyed with me. I actually went back recently to watch some of my old content and read through the dialogue to see if it was as bad as I remember, and yeah, it was. It was really bad. Corrin was such a dumb protagonist, and the plot was just so incredibly brain dead at times. Anyone remember Corrin's brilliant master plan of invading and killing everyone in Hoshido just to get Garen to sit down on the chair of truth? Or how about people not being able to say the V word without vanishing? There were just so many dumb plot points in Fates, and it truly was one of the first Fire Emblem games to just take a huge dump on its story. Considering how favorably Fates has been viewed in the years since its release, I have to wonder if Engage will see a similar renaissance with people ignoring its bad story and rather choosing to focus on its great gameplay. It hasn't happened yet, at least not according to the YouTube analytics, but who knows, maybe it will someday. Story aside though, Fire Emblem Fates was perhaps one of the most unique games in the series from a design perspective. Fire Emblem has always been about Western medieval knights, with a bit of an anime spin to it, but Fates was the first game to include Japanese aesthetics in the Hoshido Empire. For the first time, we saw samurai clash with Western knights, and it was really cool. The Hoshido and Nora royals also looked amazing, and the cutscenes were still gorgeous. I will say that I found the overall character design of Fire Emblem Fates to be a bit of a downgrade from Awakening. The art style personally just didn't meld that well with me, and this game also had some blatant fan service that I just found very trashy. But looking back at the Fates era, it was still one of my favorite games of all time, and I really hope to see a Fire Emblem renaissance like this again. With the loss of the 3DS servers, a big chunk of Fates content will be lost forever. The DLC is one of the things, but the loss of my castle is what I'm truly sad to see go. You can still build your base, of course, but I always found that the ability to visit other people's castles and fight against them was a really cool concept. It is very sad that we will never be able to experience this again. When people think back to the 3DS era, they mostly remember Awakening and Fates, but we also received a third game that shocked everyone. Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia released incredibly late into the 3DS's lifespan, and out of all the games they could have remastered, they chose Fire Emblem Gaiden, the black sheep of the franchise. No one expected them to remake this game, and to this day I still find it insane that they did. Echoes was such a deviation from Awakening and Fates. While the former two focused heavily on sandbox-style gameplay, Echoes was a much more traditional game, being so faithful to Gaiden that it baffled the community. This was apparently due to the director of the game who grew up playing Gaiden with his dad before he passed away, so he wanted to create a very faithful remake to honor his father's memory, which is incredibly wholesome. And it really shows in this remake. Fire Emblem Echoes has something that I think is sorely lacking from many modern titles. It has soul. So much love was poured into this game, and it really shows. The story was amazing, the dialogue was actually done really well, the voice acting was also great, and the character design spectacular, some of the best in the series. The cinematics were not the best though. I personally really disliked the 15 FPS anime look they were going for, but everything else about Echoes was really great. Well, everything except for the actual gameplay. Being such a close copy of Gaiden did not make for an amazing gaming experience. The maps were incredibly bad, and I also thought it was strange that we only got 2 difficulties, normal and hard. Hard not even being that challenging. There really should have been a 3rd lunatic difficulty available after beating the game. Echoes was also the first game in the series to include an incredibly controversial turn wheel mechanic, allowing you to rewind your turns, a mechanic which has appeared in every single game since, and I have a feeling it's a mainstay for the entire franchise now. Personally, I hate the turn wheel, and I still hate it to this day. I think it's just an incredibly lazy and uninspired game mechanic, and I wish there was some kind of option to turn it off or some kind of reward for not using it, but I don't want to turn this video into a turn wheel discussion, so let's just leave it at that. Looking back at Fire Emblem Echoes, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it. I absolutely adore its presentation, but it is the Fire Emblem game that I've played by far the least in the series. I've only done a single playthrough of it on the channel, and then after a single Iron Man attempt, I've never picked it up again. I just don't feel like there's anything to be gained from it. With the DLC now being gone, a lot of content will also be lost to the players, including the infamous labyrinth in the endgame, as well as the ultimate promotions for the players. And it does make me feel a bit sad, considering I spent like $50 on the DLC Season Pass. But at least I'll always have it on my 3DS. Well, as long as I don't lose it and have to get it again, that is. So yeah, looking back at the 3DS era of Fire Emblem, it sure came with its upsides and downsides. But mostly I remember it for its amazing energy in the community, and I can only hope that we get something like that again in the future. With the possibility of a new Switch console just around the corner, we might very well get a Nintendo Direct which announces a brand new Fire Emblem game, and that could lead to a new Fire Emblem renaissance similar to that of the 3DS era. If that happens, it's going to be a very exciting time to be a Fire Emblem fan. But I will say, I find it incredibly sad that Nintendo just couldn't keep the servers running. However, I do have some good news. The community is currently working hard to conserve the content with something called Pretendo. It's a GitHub archive where they're going to gather all the content so it's available for future generations. It might not be strictly legal, so I won't go into too much detail, but it's a thing, and it's a good movement by the community. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it truly is the end of an era, the 3DS era, and it does make me a bit sad as a Fire Emblem fan. But at least the content will always be there, and we'll always have a chance to access it via emulators and homebrew consoles, but we won't ever be able to go online and download the content organically again. It does make me a little sad, but I'm also looking forward to what the future will bring. My name is Mengs, thank you for watching.